Hello everyone, Jack from Cultaholic here, and it's time for what happened at Money in the Bank 2023. No matches on the kickoff show, but we do get an interview between Caleb Braxton and a teary-eyed Paul Heyman. However, it's all a little swerveroony because Heyman says he's only emotional because of what Roman's going to do to the Usos later on. On to the main show, which has a special James Bond-themed introduction. Very nice indeed. And the opening match is the men's Money in the Bank ladder match. Butch, Nakamura, Santos Escobar, Damian Priest, Ricochet, LA Knight, and Logan Paul. Butch is out in a custom sort of England shirt made by Blacksmith, I believe. That's spelled Blacksmith without the vowels. You can find them on Twitter. They do fun wrestling gear, and it looks good here. England! Everyone rushes Logan Paul at the start, shades of Daivari in the Royal Rumble, and then it all breaks down into a big old brawl. Butch gets a cricket bat from under the ring and dishes out some Bazball to everybody. The Ashes are not going so well for England right now. On the outside, Logan strikes a deal with Priest to work together. They set up some tables on the outside, but then Priest rejects a high five from Logan and just decks him instead with a big right hand. Ricochet with the first really eye-popping spot of the match, I think. He dives through the inside of a ladder to the outside of the ring. Wow. This means that LA Knight is alone inside the ring and the crowd are buzzing for him to possibly win this briefcase. But then Logan stops him, hitting a nice Russian leg sweep off the ladder down to the canvas. Logan then runs across the apron and hits a frog splash off the apron onto Priest, who's lying on a ladder bridge, which unfortunately doesn't move, but it's still a very impressive spot, and the crowd serenade Logan with a chant of "You still suck." Escobar climbs, Butch grabs a sleeper on him, and they gently kind of plop down off the side of the ladder onto another ladder bridge, right into the danger zone, because Ricochet springs in and nails them with a lovely 450. They have another big brawl, the action spilling to the outside, where Butch hits a moonsault off a ladder onto everybody. Then back in the ring, Butch gets knocked out by Logan Paul, who then knocks out Ricochet as well, with that famous knockout power. He's a boxer. We then get the latter stages of a Money in the Bank ladder match with multiple guys on adjacent ladders. Ricochet and Logan springboarding in like Spider-Men in the Spider-Verse. LA Knight pulls one ladder over, toppling a couple of competitors. He pushes the other one, sending Logan and Ricochet into the ropes. And I'll try and explain. I think they're meant to both land on the ropes, and then Ricochet is meant to Spanish fly Logan to the outside through two tables. That is sort of what happens, but it's ragged and a bit disjointed and ends in a terrifying bump. But credit to them, because they do nail it. However, for it to kind of go off without a hitch, for it to be nailed perfectly, the degree of difficulty was absolutely absurd. They did the best they could, but man, what were they expected to do? Knight goes up the ladder with Dunn. They both get close, and Dunn breaks Knight's fingers. He falls down. Then Priest is up, and he chokeslams, I keep calling him Dunn. He chokeslams Butch off, into a ladder in the corner. It's a nasty bump. I hope Butch is okay. LA Knight starts running wild, taking out folk in the ring. He heads up the ladder. He seems to have it won. The crowd come alive. But Damian Priest is there. He suplexes LA Knight off the ladder. It's kind of a broken arrow, I think. And Damian Priest is Mr. Money in the Bank, even though the crowd really wanted it to be LA Knight, like a lot. Next up, it's the women's tag team title match. Ronda and Shayna defending their belts against Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez. The returning Liv starts off the match hot, but eventually gets stomped on her injured shoulder by Shayna, and she sells it huge. She's really in pain. Finally, she gets the hot tag to Raquel, but Ronda catches her in an armbar while Raquel is up on the second rope, but then Raquel turns it into a huge avalanche powerbomb. Liv gets caught in more submissions, but she clings on as the crowd chant for VAR to see if she tapped out or not. Very funny crowd, well done. But then when Liv looks for the tag, Ronda takes out Raquel on the outside and Liv is all alone in the ring. She goes for Oblivion, but Shayna counters it and locks in the Kirifuda clutch. Liv counters that, but then she's a sitting duck for Ronda Rousey. Ronda stalks Liv, ready to finish her off, but then Ronda gets attacked from behind by, not Raquel, but by Shayna Baszler. Shayna beats her own tag partner down and leaves, and Ronda falls victim to the finishers of both her opponents, and Liv Morgan pins her. We get a new set of women's tag team champions, but I think the other story, maybe even the bigger story, is that Shayna has turned on Ronda, and we'll have to see where this goes. Next up, it's the IC title match between the champion Gunther and the challenger Matt Riddle. Or just Riddle, I guess. This one starts off kind of like a standard bout, which is a shame because I thought they would absolutely charge at each other to start things off. But Gunther does land the first big echoing blow of the match, which is obviously a big chop. A little bit later on, Riddle ducks another chop and counters it into a leg lock, dropping down to pick the ankle. But Gunther, like a bear, rains down big paws to break it up. Gunther goes after the injured ankle of Riddle, and Riddle makes several attempted comebacks into the match in between these sort of submissions on his ankle. But every time he starts to build up a head of steam, Gunther just chops him down again, sometimes literally. Like Riddle at one point goes for a big back senton, but Gunther catches him instinctively into a rear naked choke. A little bit later on from this, Riddle lands on his feet out of a German suplex, but his ankle causes him trouble, and he gets blasted with a lariat for the first big near fall of the match. Riddle gets a near fall of his own with a big PK penalty kick, and he nails Floating Bro off the top, but like I say, it only gets 2. Gunther heads up top now for his big splash, but Riddle catches him in a triangle, but Gunther lifts him up with one arm and slams his way out of it before locking in a single leg crab on the injured foot. Riddle kicks out of that, so Gunther grabs his foot and starts chopping the injured ankle, then locks in an ankle lock, or like a kind of more like a leg lock, I suppose, a standard leg lock, I guess, and then Riddle taps out, tappy, tappy, tap. It was an abrupt finish, maybe not as epic a match as I thought, but I think we get the reason for that in a sec. That's because as Gunther celebrates, here comes Drew McIntyre, who's been gone for a while, to a huge ovation. They have a stare down in the ring. Gunther shoves Drew, but then gets hit with a big headbutt and the Claymore. Drew stands tall, the crowd go wild, and Drew even celebrates with the IC title belt. Ooh, don't jinx it now, Drew. The next match is Cody Rhodes versus Dirty Dominik Mysterio, accompanied, of course, by Rhea Ripley. There is loads of heat for Dom as he comes out, while Cody is so over in the UK. The crowd are singing along to his theme tune as if it's Judas. And also, of course, we get one of the biggest whoas that we've probably heard so far. They square off and Dom lands the first blow early on. Cody goes to fire back and Dom rolls out the ring and tries to run away up the ramp. Cody chases him and throws him back in the ring, then does the drop down Cody uppercut thing, and he's in control. So in control, in fact, that Cody goes for an early crossroads, but Dom again bails out and heads to the outside, where Rhea stares Cody down, and she wants to fight, while Dom gets back in the ring and sneakily tries to remove a turnbuckle pad. The ref catches him in the act, but this distraction allows Rhea to slam Cody into the steps. Another Rhea distraction leads to a roll-up for 2, but Cody counters the subsequent 619 attempt into a spinning Alabama slam. From there, we get the Cody cutter and the crossroads, and that's it. It's a fairly routine victory for Cody Rhodes. There was a few instances of Rhea Ripley trying to interfere and asking Cody to fight her, but he overcame all that and won. Despite reports of Brock Lesnar being in London, or rumours, I guess, he didn't show up, and Cody just, celebrated. Hooray. Next up, John Cena casually walks out. What? So apparently he's in London filming a movie. It's genuinely cool to see him. He cuts a nice babyface promo. It's kind of what you'd expect. I'm glad to be here, etc. Then it starts to get a little bit unexpected in tone. That's because Cena says this is the first time we've had a premium live event in London in over 20 years, obviously SummerSlam 92, and says the decision makers think that London is maybe a hostile environment, maybe a distraction, maybe the crowd tries to take over the show, but he says you are the heart of this, you are the show. Obviously this all gets a huge pop from the crowd, but it's so interesting. It almost feels like he's kind of going off script or beyond the realms of what he's allowed to say. And while I don't think that's actually the case, because surely they would have told him not to do that, it does feel a little bit real. He also talks about respecting the crowd, and the crowd chant, "Thank you, Cena." And then he continues along this strange line saying, see, they don't like when we stop talking and let you do that and let you chant. And then he blows the roof off the place by saying, I'm here to try and bring WrestleMania to London. The crowd obviously go absolutely mad for this, as do we, sat watching it in the office. And then he's interrupted by Grayson Wallar. Grayson comes out and starts by saying, I respect you, John. I love the jorts. You were amazing in Scooby-Doo. And the crowd immediately just start telling Grayson to shut the flip up. Wallar then says, WrestleMania in England? No, you've got to be kidding me. I can think of somewhere a lot better, somewhere with lovely weather, beautiful beaches. I think we should have WrestleMania in Australia. And the crowd obviously boo this massively. Wallar points out that the past few times we've seen Cena, he's lost, and maybe he needs Wallar to save his career, essentially, and says, be my guest on the Grayson Wallar effect on my talk show in WrestleMania Australia. And Cena obviously isn't keen. Wallar isn't happy about this rejection, attacks Cena from behind, and then Cena fights back and hits the AA. Hooray! I'm more interested not in what happened physically in this segment, but what was talked about. The prospect of WrestleMania in England, and also Cena going a little bit off-piste and kind of saying stuff that maybe we wouldn't have expected him to say about WWE's attitude towards vocal, slightly unusual crowds, I suppose. The next match is the women's Money in the Bank ladder match. We get a little bit of a botcheroony as Bayley makes her entrance and the ring announcer says, representing the Judgment Day. And, you know, she's from Damage Control. It's a minor mistake. She's normally a very good ring announcer as Samantha, so we can let her off. The other competitors are Io Sky, Zelina Vega, Zoe Stark, Trish Stratus, and Becky Lynch, who gets attacked during her entrance by Zoe and Trish, who beat her down on the ramp. The action is kind of centered around the ringside area for the first part of this match. Becky tries to backdrop Trish onto a ladder set up against the ring, but Trish kind of flips up it and clambers into the ring, then gets Zoe to bring the ladder into the ring and sets it up. But then Damage Control start to dominate. So we've got two heel units working in tandem with each other, but not as one big... You know what I mean. Damage Control get into a bit of, not an argument, but a bit of confusion over who gets to climb the ladder, which gives Becky time to fly in and take them out. Then she climbs, but Zoe stops her and gets put in the disarmer through the rungs of the ladder. A visually unique spot. I like it. Trish starts to dominate. She hits a few slightly odd counters off the ladder because, like, everybody... I think there's meant to be stuff going on all at once, but there's a bit of a scramble and then everyone seems like they're kind of stuck in their animations, doing moves to each other and getting in each other's way. It's a messy part of the match, but thankfully it's short-lived and things get back on track when Bayley hits a big elbow drop off a ladder onto Becky. Io then hits a huge moonsault off a ladder and the crowd finally chant for her rather than Bayley, who is still over as ever in London, which is nice to see. Trish gets up on the ladder but is shoved off by Becky and Trish lands like right on her backside, not a back bump. It doesn't look too good. Hopefully she's okay. But then it turns out she does seem to be okay because she and Becky temporarily and unexpectedly work together to powerbomb Zelina. Becky and Trish then obviously start brawling, remembering that they hate each other, and they brawl a lot actually, until Zoe takes Becky out with a super kick and gets a set of handcuffs from under the ring, but then Becky fights back and hits the manhandle slam, sending Trish onto a ladder bridge, which doesn't budge an inch. Remember those handcuffs, by the way, which are important later on. Zoe and Zelina are in the ring. They both climb the ladder. Zelina uses the flip-flop to limited effect and then uses a sunset bomb onto a ladder bridge, which is, let's be fair, far more effective, aka terrifying. Hopefully they're both okay. Io climbs the ladder and seems to have it won, but then her stablemate Bayley turns on her and pushes the ladder over. Bayley climbs, but then Becky climbs up and stops Bayley by, I'm not joking, fish hooking her with those handcuffs from before. They both slide partway down the ladder, and then in what I honestly think is a genius finish, Io handcuffs them together through the rungs of the ladder and climbs up herself to win the Money in the Bank briefcase. In my mind, the correct winner of the match, a real rising star in, I know she's had a great career in Japan and on NXT, but a real rising star in the WWE main roster, I guess, and also a very unique finish as well. So I wasn't the biggest fan maybe of the action throughout the match, but the finish and the booking, spot on. Next up, it's the World Heavyweight Championship match with Seth Rollins defending against Finn Balor. At the house show up here in Newcastle the other night, Balor attacked Rollins at the end of the show, something they actually mention on commentary during this match. It's canon, it counts, it's important. Obviously, the crowd are really big on Seth. There's a lot of singing of his song on the way out and for a lot of the ring introductions as well. Then the pair have a big hateful stare down and a big old brawl to start. Balor immediately targeting those injured ribs of Seth. For most of the match, I think it's fair to say that Balor is on top, fighting not only with healthy ribs as opposed to Rollins' banged up ones, but also fighting with hatred because of, Rollins injuring him all those years ago. Seth fights back and hits the buckle bomb, the move that injured Balor when he became the inaugural Universal Champion. And then this allows Rollins to go up top, hit the frog splash, but nope, Balor gets the knees up, and obviously this further injures Seth's injured ribs. They then avoid each other's finishes and have an exchange of strikes. Finn goes for the Pele kick, but Seth catches the attempt and hits the pedigree, but it only gets 2. That's when the crowd go, oh, and I'm thinking, what the hell's just happened? And then the camera cuts and we see that Damian Priest has made his way down to ringside with his recently won Money in the Bank briefcase, but he doesn't do anything for now. He just takes a seat at ringside and watches on. Ooh. Rollins is very much distracted by this, as you would be, and heads outside the ring and stares down Priest and says, "What are you going to do, huh? What are you going to do?" This allows Balor to utterly demolish a distracted Seth, knocking him down from behind, beating him up, and hitting not one, but two coups de graces, one off the announce table and one off, I think, the ring steps. He hits two coups de grace, basically, on the outside. He then gets Seth back in the ring, and it really feels like he's about to win the match. He hits a shotgun dropkick on Seth, setting him up perfectly for a final climactic coup de grace. He heads up top, but then Damian Priest stands up and makes his way towards the ring, and Balor turns around like, what? He's still perched on the top, but he is totally distracted. This buys Seth enough time to recover, so when Balor comes off the top, Seth heads off up the ramp, looking a little bit bewildered by this turn of events, it has to be said, while at ringside, Balor and Priest argue. If I was Balor, I'd be more furious than that, I think. What does this mean for the future of the Judgment Day? We'll have to wait and see. Before the main event, we get a little interview with Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, the tag team champions. They're up in a skybox and they are excited to be here in London. Sami thinks that tonight is the night Roman Reigns finally gets what's coming to him. I guess we'll see if he's right. The main event is, of course, the Bloodline Civil War between Roman Reigns and Solo Sikoa and the Usos. We get big entrances, big ring announcements as well. During the stare down, while the ring announcements are going on, the Usos are just ranting at Roman and Solo, who just glare menacingly back at them. Early on, the Usos use their tag team expertise to get the edge over Solo to start, but then Roman orders Solo to tag him in, and there's a visible bit of tension between the two. Roman does take control, though, breaking down Jay and taunting the crowd, who really let Roman have it in this match. Solo comes back in, starts to dominate, but the crowd just keep focusing on Roman, saying, "Stand up if you hate Roman." And eventually Roman sits down on the apron and tells Paul Heyman, England is the worst place in the world. Roman and Solo dominate the vast majority of, certainly the first 2/3 of this match, I suppose, until eventually Jimmy avoids a Superman punch and takes Roman to the outside with a big clothesline to the floor. That seems to be a bit of a turning point in this match, as then Jay gets a hot tag and starts laying the smackdown on Solo like The Rock. He then hits a hip attack in the corner, but then Roman gets back in and hits him with a Superman punch. Roman sets up for the spear, but then Jimmy and Jay hit him with a double spear instead. 1-2, Solo breaks it up. Roman wants to spear Jimmy, but gets super kicked instead. Jimmy then heads up for a splash, but Roman catches him on the way down in the guillotine. Jimmy almost goes unconscious, but no, he manages to just cling on and lifts up Roman slowly and drives him into the corner. Jay tags in. Roman doesn't seem to realize, grabbing Jimmy, I think, in another guillotine, and they both run into the ref, who gets bumped. Uh-oh. The Usos hit the 1D, and Jay gets a visual pinfall, but of course, the ref's down, so it's not a real pinfall. The Usos go up for a double splash, but Solo gets back involved and helps Roman turn the tables. They then hit double Uranagis, and then a spike to Jimmy from Solo, and then a spike and spear combination to Jay. Solo helps Roman stack the Usos, just as Heyman predicted on the pre-show. 1, 2, but the Usos kick out. One of the better near falls I can remember, I think, in this whole spell of Roman dominance. Roman orders a kind of reluctant at first Solo to prepare the announce table. Solo lays Jimmy across it, gets up and prepares to splash him through it, and by this point Solo seems to kind of agree with Roman, and he's like, yes, I'm going to do this. He leaps, but Jimmy moves out the way and Solo crashes through the announce table. Back in the ring, Jay and Roman are going back and forth. Roman hits the spear. 1, 2, but again, Jay kicks out, and in Roman Reigns fashion, low blows Roman in the process of kicking out, but the referee doesn't see it. With Solo down on the outside, Roman is now isolated against his cousins, who hit him with a lot of super kicks. Jay heads up top, big splash to Roman Reigns, 1, 2, 3, and Jey Uso has pinned the Tribal Chief. A huge win for the Usos, a gigantic pop for the pinfall in London, and do we possibly have our SummerSlam main event sealed in stone? I don't know quite yet, but would anyone be surprised now if it was Roman versus Jay, now that Jay has pinned the Tribal Chief? We'll have to wait and see, but I think that might be what happens. Thank you very much for watching this video. I've been Jack from Cultaholic. Thank you to Sam and Luke on the edit, and thank you all for joining me on this wonderful Money in the Bank journey. Leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments section down below, and I'll see you very soon.